Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Saborski here, and we are going to be um, talking about cognitive development in early adulthood. If Dr. Starling got through physical development in early adulthood, this is the first lecture that you will be hearing from me. Um, Honestly, just to give you guys some upfront information, adulthood is probably the driest section of human development. I really much prefer teaching about childhood and adolescence and early childhood and infancy and toddlerhood because there's all these amazing, really cool things going on. And there are some amazing, really cool things going on in early adulthood too. Of course, we're all in that phase right now. So I'm going to do my best to try to keep this as interesting as possible. Please listen out for, I guess. I'm going to make some comments throughout this to ensure that we are listening and participating. That I'm going to say that there's discussion board questions in here. So if I mention, hey, this is something I want you guys to go and talk about, there's going to be a discussion board in the folder for cognitive development in early adulthood, and I expect you guys to participate and put some input in that discussion board that will be created for this section of material. Um, it's part of your participation grade, and it would be just like you were participating in a live class. And I know that this is a little bit different than being in a live class, but hopefully that helps stimulate some participation and make things just a little bit more interesting. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to be talking about are changes in the structure of the way we think. If everybody remembers from talking about Piaget, Piaget made a comment that after formal operations, there really weren't a lot of changes, and this is just not true. There are a lot of changes in early adulthood. Our cerebral cortex is continuing to grow. Um, there is a lot going on in the prefrontal cortex, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second. And generally, there's just a lot of brain growth that still continues as we hit early adulthood. So, some things that we see happening there's definitely development in the frontal lobes. There's pruning of synapses going on in the brain, cutting back some of those things that maybe we needed more in our adolescent years that now, as adults, we just don't need anymore. And there's a lot more growth and myelination of other neural fibers, even though it's a little bit slower than that massive growth we saw in adolescence. These changes are really helping to hone and change the way we think. There are changes because of the major life events that happen during early adulthood. There are changes because of the education we may be continuing to receive, or our job choices, or whatever the case may be. Um, so, really, there's a lot of changing in the prefrontal cognitive control network. So, things happen with our planning and our reasoning and decision making. Those things all strengthen as we get older. So, some of the things that may cause them to strengthen are things like going to college, starting a career, maybe getting married during early adulthood, maybe having kids during early adulthood. So, what we see is that when somebody gets fMRI during this time in young adulthood, there is really a lot of change in the cerebral cortex. Um, what we see along with this is that there's a lot of experience dependent brain growth. So, if you remember, that's brain growth that occurs based upon the things you're doing. So, whatever a person is doing is changing their brain, which is really kind of cool. So, there's going to be more knowledge and refinement and skills based on what we're doing because of this experience dependent brain growth. So after Piaget's formal operation stage, we see that people are jumping to a type of thought called post-formal thinking or post-formal thought. So we're going to look at a bunch of different theories that look at post-formal thought. Among them, there are things like Perry's epistemic cognition, and my personal favorite one, because I like to say it, Le Bouvevif's theory of pragmatic thinking, um, and a couple other things that go along with that. So, to start out, we're going to talk about Perry's theory of epistemic cognition, which basically refers to how we reflect on things, how we arrive at just different facts and beliefs and ideas based on our knowledge. Um, this epistemic cognition, epistemic means of or about knowledge. So, generally speaking, Perry is talking about the knowledge that we possess as we mature. Um, we see that young adults respond dramatically in different ways to the way that, as they grow throughout, especially throughout times like college. So, one big study that Perry did involved Harvard University undergraduates at the end of each of their 4 years. They were asked what stood out during that previous year, and students reflected on things such as their lives as they grew, um, and knowing that they changed as they experienced the way university life was changing and they were moving closer to adult roles. So really, they started to notice the different things that were going on in life for them, and how they were growing as they moved on. So younger students really were thinking differently as well. Younger students thought differently as well versus older students. So what we saw was that younger students were much more likely to think dualistically, as older students were moving more towards relativistic thinking, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So, three stages of epistemic cognition. Dualistic thinking. This is basically thinking in black and white, right or wrong, thinking that there's like no gray area in between a subject. So, that either in a situation, there's either one thing or another thing. There's nothing in the middle. Um, so, the example that the text gives is that a college freshman said that when I went to my first lecture, what the man said was just like God's word. I believe everything he said because he is a professor and this is a respected position. Um, so believing that someone is a professor, you're thinking that everything they have given you is right because they're a professor. But we know that that's not actually true. There's more to go on than it's just right or wrong. So dualistic thinking. Another example would be saying like. Um, because you get an A on your next test, everything is fantastic. Um, but if you get an F on your test, everything is bad. And really, it's not like that. It's not just all one or the other. There are different things in between. Hopefully, you are all going to get A's on your next test, though. The next stage is relativistic thinking. This is the idea that all knowledge has a framework. It's not just black or white. It's not just right or wrong, good or bad. It's that there are different opinions and there are gray areas, and topics are much more diverse than just one side or the other. There's not just one opinion versus another opinion. There's a lot of different things that can be included. There's also the idea that there is absolutely no absolute truth, meaning in most situations, there is no 100% right and there is no 100% wrong. There are different things that can be going on with that situation. And, different people are going to think different things in different situations. A great example is, and you're probably going to be listening to this after our election, so we'll see who actually is president, but you've probably heard a lot of different things going on with the election, of people saying Trump is bad and Clinton is bad and vice versa, and Trump is good and Clinton is good, and it's just there's a lot more complexity to things like political elections than it just being one versus the other. So continuing on with this idea of relativistic thinking, um, it's much more flexible thinking than the dualistic thinking that we see in younger college students. It's much more tolerant. There's a lot more acceptance of opinions and other things going on. And this realization that everybody has their own framework of thought and everybody creates their own truth, and that not everybody, for the most part, there's no 100% correct. So, the next stage of epistemic cognition is commitment within relativistic thinking. Um, so, basically, this is the idea that, instead of choosing between opposing views, people try to formulate a more personally satisfying perspective that synthesizes contradictions. So, honestly, what people are doing here is that they are trying to, just look at their belief system and figure out the best way to look at a situation. They're weighing their options. They're not just going with one or the other. They're trying to look at other people's opinions. They're trying to be flexible, um, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that's realized when it comes to Perry's epistemic cognition is that um, a lot of this growth and change has to occur in a higher education setting, or a setting where There's a fostering of individual reflection along with reflecting on what other people are saying and taking in opposing perspectives. So we do see that individuals that go to college are more likely to reach the relativistic thinking that is seen in Perry's epistemic cognition. And people that don't tend to get a further education may be more stuck in the dualistic thinking, although it all depends upon their environment and situation, and what's going on with them. But the important thing is that in a college setting, we see that different opinions are challenged and there's more opportunity to reflect on what other people feel and think. And, honestly, you are in a great setting right now to develop uh, being more reflective and um, being more understanding of others and expanding upon what your opinion is by including the information that others provide to you. Now to talk about Gisela Le Bouvet Vif, who, once again, that's my favorite name to say in this entire course. It's just kind of fun. Le Bouvet Vif. We're going to talk a little bit about their theory of pragmatic thinking. So during young adulthood, we see that there's a shift from what is called hypothetical thinking to pragmatic thinking. Hypothetical thinking goes along with not having a whole lot of life experience, whereas as individuals age, they're able to think more pragmatically. They have more ability to think logically about real world problems. They understand a little bit more about what could go into a situation based on life experience. Um, to break, I apologize if you can hear that noise in the background. I'm downstairs recording in my house, and my 5 and 3-year-old are upstairs running around like crazy, apparently. So if you can hear that bang, bang, bang noise, that's them. If you can't, just chalk it up to me being crazy. But that's what I hear right now while I'm trying to record this. It's incredibly distracting. Um, anyway, back to the lecture. As far as pragmatic thinking is concerned, um, when you get to a point where you have actual life experience in different areas where there's real world things occurring, you can see that you can take information that you have to help you solve problems more logically instead of looking at the hypothetical situation that you haven't yet experienced. I hope that makes sense. Um, so, we also start to see that there is really a balance of things being good versus bad. We see that there's a balance in life, that there are certain constraints, and not every situation is wholly positive. In fact, most situations we see are not wholly positive. For example, having getting married. There are things about getting married that are fantastic. You have somebody that you can share things with, a good friend, whatever you think of in that marriage. But then there are also some negatives too. You lose some of your independence at times, and you have to rely on other people to make financial decisions and things like that. So while marriage is fantastic, there are also some downsides. And another young adult experience that people will have as they get older would be something like having a first child. Having a child involves a lot of fantastic, amazing things. But along with that, there are also some downsides. For example, you can't always go where you want to go and do the things that you want to do because you have a kid that you have to take care of, and it's not always as simple as it once was. So Le Bouvet Vif really points out that there are a lot of dynamics to living. There's a lot of things that go into being a young adult that aren't always fantastic. There are things that are great but have downsides as well. And really, there's imperfection and compromise involved a lot when you get older in life. Along with this, Le Bouvet Vif stated that as adults get older, they are getting much better at integrating their cognition with emotion. They realize that you can be in a situation and realize that there's positive emotion as well as negative emotion, that mixed emotions occur in these situations that happen as you get older. We call this cognitive affective complexity, which is essentially the awareness of conflicting positive and negative feelings and coordinating them into an organized structure. So, really, understanding in situations that you can feel certain things and you can feel fantastic and anxious at the same time. The book gives the example a lot of having a first child where you find that you're very fulfilled, but at the same time you're struggling so much because there's so many new things that you're experiencing. This could also be something like when you have your first job. Um, Being in your first real job outside of college is going to probably be fantastic in so many ways, but there's also going to be a lot of stress involved because you're going to be figuring out new things and trying to, really navigate life. So that's what cognitive affective complexity is. It's realizing that there's more to it than just good or bad. There's more to it than just happy or sad. There's a lot that goes into life. So before we move forward into the information on expertise and creativity, here's a little bit of a discussion board area. I want everybody to go on the discussion board that is labeled Le Bouvet Vif, and I want them to talk about an experience where they realized that there was positive and negative, and really talk about how they've experienced cognitive affective complexity. So there's a discussion board in this set of slides, in physical and or in the cognitive development and early adulthood slides, that is going to be just for this topic. And I'm going to be reviewing who comments, and that's going to add into your participation. So moving on to expertise and creativity. There's a video in this slide that if you would like to watch, you can. It's involving chess experts and their abilities to play the game of chess. Um, so as far as expertise is concerned, you are all working to become experts in one field or another right now. I'm sure many of you are nursing majors. I'm sure many of you are psychology majors. There might be some other majors in the course. But honestly, college is your first set of education towards becoming an expert. It's going to be a while before you're an expert, but you're trying to acquire a large amount of knowledge in a particular field. Um, so you're starting out right now by specializing in a major or an occupation and working to gain expertise. Um, as far as what experts have versus people who are new to a field, if you're an expert in something, you can remember things more quickly, information about your field. You can reason more quickly and effectively. You're better at problem solving for your field. Um, you're more able to think abstractly, and honestly, you're able to approach problems in a more thorough and descriptive way. Whereas somebody who is new to a field is more likely to just kind of look at the surface of a problem. Um, so that's essentially what expertise is being able to really understand and grasp and have a large amount of information in a particular area. Um, Expertise in a situation is really a big component of being creative. Without expertise, it's really hard to be creative. It's really hard to be a good problem solver in a particular field. So moving on a little bit to creativity. Creativity requires expertise, and a lot of times what we see people moving from is, when you have something in front of you, you're no longer problem solving, you're problem finding, which basically means, a lot of people, as they develop expertise in an area, they're trying to look at situations in their field and figure out how they can get more knowledge in that area. So really, they're trying to find things that need to be worked on or changed in their area of expertise and finding a problem instead of just solving a problem. Obviously, as talked about before, this requires. Okay, so some other things about creativity. We see that creativity varies through discipline and with individuals. So, those who are in creative fields like poetry or music or art or acting or any of those areas, they usually show an early rise in creativity. Um, and this is probably because they don't need the extensive formal education before they produce things. Whereas those who are scholars and scientists who have higher academic degrees and take a lot of time to do research, they tend to achieve later and have their biggest creative moments later on in their career. And a lot of the time we see that they make maybe one major lifetime contribution. Some information on a study by Dolinger. Um, from what I can see, this is not included in the text, and this isn't usually something I typically talk about, and these are Dr. Starling's slides. So I am not going to cover this material. Um, so If you have information that she's giving you elsewhere, that's great. But I'm going to actually not do these two slides. As far as identity and creativity are concerned, with that study by Dollinger, it appears that those who have information seeking identity, who really, are looking and trying to find out new things, are more likely to be more creative than those who have different identity styles. So, moving on to life after high school. So, as far as your college experience is concerned, college is considered to be one of the most influential testing grounds that anybody is ever to experience. You are probably, learning more in this setting than you have learned in previous settings, not just academically, but also as far as life is concerned. You're given a lot more responsibility. While you're not totally set free from your family and your parents, you are still, really responsible for yourself more on a day-to-day basis than you probably were in the past. There are a lot more new ideas that you're learning about, your new beliefs. You're probably in a more diverse setting than what you might have been when you were in high school. And all the different demands of college lead to a lot of cognitive growth. That post formal thought we were talking about before, new thinking patterns, learning how to think in a more flexible way, that relativistic thinking that we were discussing before. Um, Along with that, with college, we see that people who are more involved in college education, who tend to be more in clubs and different organizations, are really those who are even more so getting more cognitive growth and thinking and getting more expansive thinking patterns than those who are not involved in college programming outside of the classroom. So, as all of you are experiencing, college education is hard. There are many people that can finish college, and there are also several people who drop out of college and do not continue their education. There are many different reasons that this occurs. Um, so, you have people that are leaving college due to finding that the transition was really difficult for them and that they don't adapt as easily as they thought they would. There are things like lack of motivation and study skills that can impact it, and not having really what it takes to finish the college education, because it takes a lot of motivation, and it takes a lot of um, really self discipline to finish a college education. Um, there are other things that can cause issues like financial pressures. Obviously, you all know here that college is very expensive, um, and there are definitely other things that can contribute. Like if a person comes to a school and they don't have a large support network there, and they don't make a lot of friends, that can make completing an education very difficult as well. So now to talk about vocational choice. This is another discussion board assignment that I would like you to go complete for class participation. So I want everybody to think about way back what they wanted to be when they grew up. I'm thinking about like when you were in kindergarten or preschool. What were the jobs that you wanted to do when you were a young child? We're going to talk in a second about the stages of vocational development. But we see that when kids are in these early stages of kindergarten or a little bit younger or a little older in first grade, their job choice is usually kind of interesting. For example, if you ask my 5-year-old son what he would like to be right now, he will look at you and he will say, "I want to be a singing, cooking. Oh, I'm sorry, a singing, architect, cooking, ninja, happy doctor." He gets the architect from my husband, who's an architect, and he gets the happy doctor from me because I'm a psychologist. He also loves to sing, and he loves the show Chopped. And so those are his those choices that he would like to be as when he grows up. He wants to be a singing, architect, cooking, ninja, happy doctor. I'm not sure where ninja came in. That was thrown in at some point, but as you can see, that's kind of like a fantasy career. Kind of an awesome one too. So I want you to answer in the discussion board. It's going to be labeled vocational choice. What did you want to be when you were in kindergarten, when you grew up? And then I want you to look back to high school and see if your career path changed at all during that adolescent stage and what you were thinking you might end up doing. And then I want you to think about what you want to be now. And I want you to answer these 3 questions in the discussion board for kindergarten, high school, and your current career choice, and just see how they match up. It might be interesting to see what other people say and how you've changed as you've grown. So that brings us to the three stages of vocational development. So there are three stages. The first one is the fantasy stage, and we see this happening in early and middle childhood. Children look into the different career options that they might have by fantasizing about them. Preferences come from things like familiarity, as you see from my 5-year-old son. His familiarity is that he knows his dad is an architect and his mom is a happy doctor, and he has a little bit of knowledge of what both those careers are, and he finds them interesting. Obviously, ninja is kind of a glamour and excitement related career, as is maybe being a singer or somebody who cooks for a living. He knows that Chopped is a very exciting show, and that's where he gets that idea from. So you can see that during that early childhood period, the fantasy period, that preferences are guided by familiarity, glamour, and excitement. But it's probably likely that when Noah grows up, he will not be a singing, architect, cooking, ninja, happy doctor. He might pick one of those things, but I don't think it's going to be exactly that. But I'm voting for ninja. During the tentative period, that goes between ages 11 and 16, really, during that middle school and high school age range, people are starting to think about careers in more complex ways. They're starting to look at what their interests are and what they might want to do in terms of those interests. A lot of people might have picked their career in adolescence and they stuck with it. For example, I had a friend that when I met her in the 6th grade, she said that she was without a doubt going to be a microbiologist that worked with enzymes, and that is exactly what she does. She is a biologist that works with enzymes and does that sort of work. And, that was what she wanted to be in 6th grade, and that continued on throughout her adulthood. Other people might find that their interests change as they get older and have more education and awareness about who they are as people, and they start to realize what their abilities and values are. For example, when I was an adolescent, I wanted to be a theater major. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I got to college and I took a psychology class, and here I am. I found out my interests were way different than what I thought they originally were. So people seem to still change as they go through life during this tentative period of vocational development. And lastly, the realistic period is in the late teens and early 20s, and people are starting to really realize what the practical reality of life is, that they need to pick a career that will possibly help them as they grow and change as adults. Um, they're going to be looking more into different majors in college, and they're going to be seeing different things they're interested in, but really they're going to be moving in a direction where they see, okay, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, or at least part of the rest of my life. And then in that final phase of the realistic stage, they end up doing something called crystallization, and that is basically when they pick their focus and they stick with it. So once you pick your major and you stick with that major throughout college, you have reached the stage of crystallization. So that's part of the realistic stage of vocational choice. So obviously, personality plays a role in what we do when we're choosing our different vocations. So we have here the Myers Briggs personality types. So you can look at that on your own time and see what where you think you fit as far as these different personalities are concerned. Um, but there are thought to be different types of personalities. John Holland identified 6 different personality types that he felt affected people's vocational choice. So we have the investigative type, which is somebody who enjoys working with ideas. And these are people that become things like um, physicists or engineers, scientific occupations. We have the social type, which is somebody who probably will go towards a career in human services, somebody who may be a psychologist or a teacher, go towards social work in one of those areas. The realistic personality type is those who prefer world problems, working with objects, maybe like mechanical occupations. So somebody who goes towards something like plumbing or welding or construction, or being a mechanic or surveying, one of those areas. Another type is the artistic person, who tends to go towards an artistic field, obviously, like writing or music or visual arts or theater. We have a conventional person who likes well structured tasks, likes to do things in business. Maybe they end up as an accountant or somebody in banking or something like that. And then the enterprising person who is adventurous and a strong leader, who's might become like a CEO in a company or head towards politics or something like that. So obviously, there are family influences on vocation choice. A lot of the time, people look at parents' jobs when choosing their vocation. If they're in a higher SES home, they're more likely to pick a higher status job. Um, there are other things that we see going along with it as family influence, being told different career options by family. And really, the more you observe somebody in your family and what job they've chosen is going to influence you. Because if you see that somebody is an engineer, for example, and they enjoy their job and you learn a lot about what their job is as you're growing, you might be more likely to choose something in that field because you have more knowledge about it. Teachers also influence vocation choice quite a bit. We see that people who are preparing for careers, they have, um, when you ask them about what led them in their education, they say that sometimes that teachers influence their choice. High school students think a lot about who say their teachers were caring or accessible, are more likely to succeed and more likely to pick a career that is influenced by a teacher if they feel like those relationships are strong. Um, and also that encouragement from teachers also influences an individual in what direction they're going to go. Luckily, gender stereotypes have decreased as far as vocation choice over the past several years. Um, we see women choosing more occupations that used to be more highly held by men. For example, psychology used to be a more male dominated field, and we're seeing a large increase in the female interest in the field and in graduate programs having more females to males when it comes to obtaining doctorates in psychology and things like that. And also in fields like nursing, we're seeing a larger increase in males that are interested, as it used to be a more predominantly female career. Um, so this is great. Changes in gender role attitudes are fantastic, um, and we're seeing that there are more people that are trying to break the gender stereotype. So that brings us to the end of cognitive development in early adulthood. I hope this was somewhat interesting. Once again, if this is the first set of slides you're watching from me, I know it's quite difficult to listen to a slide presentation without being actually in the class, but I hope that this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Look out for the 2 discussion boards for this set of slides and that I mentioned earlier. So if you were listening and taking notes, you should know exactly where you're supposed to be doing the discussion boards. So I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much, and I will be posting more slides soon.